and welcome to the investiture of Professor Robin Fretwell Wilson as the Roger and Stephanie Joslin Professor of Law. Investitures are a long-established tradition in academia as a way to acknowledge and honor faculty members who, over the course of their careers, have shown the highest level of achievement in their scholarship, teaching, and public engagement. As I will illustrate in a moment, Robin's work places her in this highest echelon of achievement in all these areas. Investitures, however, are also celebrations, and we are pleased to celebrate with Robin's special guests today. They are Alice Fretwell, Robin's mom, and Glenn Wilson, her son. David Hyman, our colleague and her mentor and sometimes co-author. Maggie Gallagher, with whom she has worked on issues relating to supporting married families. Margaret Howard, a colleague from Washington and Lee. Don Franzen, the Chief of Staff for Utah Senator Stuart Adams. Anthony Kreis, a co-author and former student. And Brian Ogalski, a colleague and co-investigator on same-sex marriage issues. Please join me in welcoming them to our celebration today. Investitures also honor donors whose generosity make this unique support of faculty work possible. Robin is the inaugural recipient of the Roger and Stephanie Joslin Professorship in Law, which was established in 2011 by Roger and Stephanie Joslin. Roger, who passed away last year, was a member of the class of 1961, graduating magna cum laude and Order of the Coif. Stevie, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, is a civic leader and philanthropist in the Bloomington Normal community, and we are so grateful for their support of the College of Law. We are also delighted to be joined today by a distinguished campus leader, Dr. Ilasanmi Adeshida, who graciously permits us all to call him Ade. Ade is the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, the Provost, and the Chief Academic Officer of the university, as well as the Donald Bigger Willett Professor of Engineering, a Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and Professor of Materials Science and Engineering. An expert in nanofabrication processes and ultra-high-speed optoelectronics, he was the 13th Dean of the College of Engineering here at the university. As provost, he oversees the campus's academic programs, policies, and priorities, and I have been delighted to work with him over the past 10 months. Please join me in welcoming Provost Ilasanmi Adeshida.
Thank you very much, Dean Colombo, and good afternoon. On behalf of the Chancellor and the entire campus administration, it is my pleasure to be here to offer personal and institutional congratulations to Professor Robin Fretwell Wilson as the inaugural, I say that again, as the inaugural Roger and Stephanie Joslin Professor. So you set the standard. We are celebrating and recognizing her significant accomplishments as a researcher, a teacher, and as an advocate for legal processes that protect equally all those who live under them. And it is important to remember that what a distinction it is to earn such an honor on a campus with international reputation for outstanding research, scholarship, and teaching among our faculty. As a faculty member myself, and now the provost, the investiture of a colleague with an endowed professorship is always a high point on my calendar. These permanently endowed positions are the most prestigious and most cherished academic honors we can offer as a campus. This ceremony gives us the chance to celebrate Professor Wilson's honor together and to recognize excellence among the academic faculty here at the university. But they are also very public and very clear reminders to our peers and our competitors that Illinois is a place where outstanding scholarship and hard work is prized and encouraged. Make no mistake, this may be a ceremony taking place in the College of Illinois here in Urbana-Champaign, but the rest of the academic world is watching as well. And as you all certainly know, when it comes to these celebrations in law, it has been a very busy semester, and this event seems to be coming with great frequency. I like that. In my opinion, they can never be too often. And in fact, these are clear indications of the sustained and recognized excellence of your college, your faculty, and of the respect in which you are held by alumni and friends who have been touched by you. Professor Wilson embodies the role of our faculty, the role our faculty can play in assisting our state, nation, and world in addressing the very real and very complex issues we face as a society. Her research and scholarship come into play at the intersection of law, politics, and personal freedom. And as we all know, when it comes to gray and murky areas, they may be none more difficult to navigate than those created at this nexus. And if you need examples of the broad, public, and lasting impacts, when mistakes occur in this space, all you need to look at is the national and international news of this week and about some actions one of our neighbors took to the east. I think they call that Indiana. Professor Wilson's work and our willingness and ability to translate it into knowledge that informs the public debate around issues of access and equity is having an immediate and a permanent impact on our national legal landscape. That is the kind of impact that has earned her the Joslin professorships that we are investing today for the first time. And I'm certain it is exactly the kind of societal impact Roger and Stephanie envisioned when they established this award. The Joslins and those like them who established these endowments have such faith in the mission and capacity of this university that they know they know and step up and make these permanent investments in our faculty. Investments just like this one will benefit those they will never meet. They will never meet. This kind of vision and this level of trust are both energizing and humbling. There really are no more visible examples of the impact of direct private investment in public universities than through support of chairs, professorships, and fellowships. This gives literally investment in people, in ideas, and in the human potential. These positions get to the very heart of what a university, much like ours, what a public land-grant university should be and should do. We're in the business of translating knowledge into impact and putting the power of ideas into the hands of our citizens, whether local, national, or global. I believe that endowments such as this one will define our competitive success as an institution in the coming years. Privately funded professorships, fellowships, and chairs allows us a critical edge when it comes to recruiting both new, young faculty and to ensure ensuring that some of the most accomplished scholars in the nation, like Professor Wilson, continue to call Illinois home. I think I may just take a moment to remind Professor Wilson that this award comes for past accomplishments, but also we envisage as a campus, Illinois is your home and also a reward for coming accomplishments. Congratulations.
You'll get your turn. Thank you, Adi. The role of an academic is a balance of research, teaching, and public engagement. Forgot something. Yeah, I have a prop, actually. It's a career spent in search of clarity and fairness in an ever-changing legal landscape. When done right, it's a career undertaken with enthusiasm, courage, and integrity. These words, enthusiasm, courage, and integrity, are the perfect description of Professor Robin Wilson. A nationally recognized expert on family law and health law and the director of Illinois' Family Law and Policy Program, Robin has dedicated her career to putting legal theory in practice in the form of concrete legal reform. Over the past several years, Robin has been a vocal advocate of balancing religious freedom with strong legal prescriptions against discrimination, particularly discrimination against members of the LGBT community. My practice in hosting past investitures, I've done a couple of them this year, has been to recount the career achievements of our particular honoree. But today I'm going to deviate from that just a bit. You can find Robin's many achievements, including her 7 books, her dozens of chapters and articles, along with her many awards for scholarship, teaching, and service, including the State of Virginia's Citizen Legislative Award, listed in her vita on our website. Instead, what I want to do over the next couple of minutes is describe a small slice of what Robin has accomplished over the past few months. Perhaps it's just me, and I'll apologize in advance to our visitor from that great state. But Utah is not the first state that pops into my mind as a place for the advocates of religious freedom to reach a compromise with the advocates for non-discrimination laws for the LGBT community. I'd expect such compromise here in Illinois, or maybe in New York or California. Heck, I might have expected it in Indiana, which goes to show you how much I know. But not Utah. In that state, however, Robin worked tirelessly with representatives of the Utah legislature, representatives of the Mormon Church, and the LGBT community to find a path for compromise and the passage of legislation that had been stalled literally for years by a lack of trust between these opposing forces. Legislation that both protects religious freedom while outlawing discrimination. And her efforts bore fruit. Senator Stuart Adams from Utah worked closely with Robin in this process and had these comments about Robin's work. Protecting religious liberties without discriminating can be divisive. In Utah, we wanted a balanced, equalized, sensible solution. Because of Robin's efforts and profound expertise, we found a balanced solution that did not divide us. In fact, it united us. At the end of the day, actually, at the end of several grueling, sleepless weeks, with the passage of SB 296 and SB 297, we were able to protect the natural rights of employment and housing while simultaneously codifying the strongest institutional and individual liberties protections in the nation. Without Robin's guidance, expertise, and knowledge, I am not sure the results would have achieved our desired solution. While the senator's words are a strong testament to Robin's efforts, I also want to share another comment on Robin's work in Utah, one that I don't think that even Robin knows about, because I have kept it to myself for today's event. I don't receive many handwritten letters these days. I doubt many of us can remember the last time we received a handwritten letter. But a few days ago, this one arrived at my office. It was written by Karen Allred, the committee secretary for the Utah Legislative Committee considering the legislation at issue. And here is what she had to say. Dear Dean Colombo, a woman from your faculty did something amazing during Utah's recent legislative session. Legislators and staff members are abuzz about this woman who showed up in Salt Lake City and secured the passage of SB 296 and 297, two bills which have been going around the Hill in some form for some time. She helped draft the anti-discrimination and religious freedom amendments, and then came to the room where they were heard in committee, to an overflow crowd, many of whom were angry and anxious. You could feel the tension in the room. Then she took the witness stand to explain and answer questions. She did so with such brilliance and simplicity that there was a transformation in that room. It was like a calming of the waters, and everyone there felt it. Anger and stubbornness became kindness and hope and possibility. Thank you for the loan of Dr. Robin Fretwell Wilson, who made history in our state. She is inspirational. Signed, Karen Allred, Committee Secretary. My own view is that there is no higher tribute to the work of a legal academic than being able to pinpoint specifically how that person's work affected real, significant change in public policy. The words of Senator Adams and Ms. Allred are testaments to how Robin's work has done exactly that. Work that embodies those qualities of enthusiasm, perhaps laced with tenacity in this particular case, courage, and integrity. And so, Robin, it is indeed a privilege for me today to recognize your many accomplishments and bestow on you this most deserving honor. Would you please stand so that I may present you with the medallion marking your investiture as the Roger and Stephanie Joslin Professor of Law. Now it's your turn.
So some of you know that I am a big texter, and I really apologize to you for this, but I can't find my son. And he was coming on the way after an exam, so I'm going to tell him that we're in the auditorium. Because I'm not entirely positive that we did that. And if somebody could, that would be amazing. I would be very grateful, especially since early in these remarks I had something in particular to say about him. But in any event, thank you so much, John. It's a beautiful letter. I hope I can steal it from you at some point. And thank you, sir, for coming. I'm so grateful to you, Audie. So first, I want to thank the Joslin family. I'm so sorry not to have met Roger Joslin. I know he was a great man. And I know that because I gave a talk in Utah last summer about Hobby Lobby, of all things. And a gentleman came up to me and said, "Did you know Roger Joslin?" And I said, "No, Sad, I'm so sad that I did not. He passed." And he told me that he was a legendary attorney, gave legendary counsel. And that makes this honor so much more profound for me. I'm sorry that I did not meet him. I am delighted that Mrs. Joslin may be joining us this fall for our Hobby Lobby Symposium, which will be co-sponsored by our new family law program, by the Epstein Health Law program, and by the Law Review, as well as DePaul University. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about Roger. I think that'll be a special treat. So I thought I would just talk about how I wound up here and why it's such a privilege to be a part of this community and a privilege to have a voice in how issues related to family, family law, LGBT rights, and religious conscience play out nationally. So I want to start with my mom, who is here, Alice Fretwell. I'm so glad that my mom can be here. I'm only sad that my father could not also be here. He passed away nearly 25 years ago. Now, it's easy to say that without them, I would have nothing. And without them, my work would be so much more impoverished. Some of you may know that in January, I wrote an op-ed. I pitched a whole series of op-eds, in fact, to the New York Times for their room for debate, because I thought they were missing the ball. They needed to be talking about the American dream. And this was a wonderful opportunity for me in particular to talk about the promise of climbing into the middle class and how in many ways that has evaporated in front of so many lower income people. Now that wasn't always the case, as I said in my op-ed. My father grew up in the Appalachia, literally on dirt floors. And he lost his parents by the time he was a teenager, and he didn't really have a path forward. I didn't say in my op-ed, but I'm happy to say to you that the family lore is that my father was busted for running moonshine with his brother and invited to either go to jail or go in the Navy. That turned out to be a really good call. And in fact, it gave him a lift and a path to the middle class. It changed his life. It gave him a skill. Now that matters not only because each of us deserve a shot at the American dream, but because work is so central to permitting people to marry and to have stable families and to realize the parts of the American dream that have exactly nothing to do with money and everything to do with what it means to be a part of our society. Now, there were these paragraphs, my mom doesn't know this, that were cut, right? You know how they are. They're so mercenary about the number of words. And in those paragraphs, I also talked about my mom and the American dream. So I'm most happy and have been waiting most for this day. So I could tell you the part that got cut. My mom, this part's in there, carried my family when my father, who was a welder, was burned. And again years later when he died. Now, my mom just retired from Eastern Virginia Medical School, and I hope you get to visit with her and talk about that. After 35 years, she started out as a clerk typist too, and literally there was nobody lower that you could start out as at Eastern Virginia Medical School. And at the end of that long run, my mother finished as the Assistant Dean for Faculty Affairs. She was the brain trust for a fledgling medical school that grew into a first-class facility. And she kept track, and some of these folks will tell you, she watched over 1,800 faculty. And nearly any one of them, ask her, and she will rattle off like all the relevant things that they've done and what their stature is in the diabetes international community and this, that, and the other. And you can test that by asking her, and you'll see that. She knows these people inside, outside, backwards, forwards, sideways. Now, EVMS was very good to my mom. It was as good to her as she was to it. In fact, the little bit of writing that I have done about work-life balance is ripped straight from seeing firsthand how EVMS's flexibility with my mom at a time of great stress for my family allowed my mom to be all things to all people, at least for a little bit of time, without losing her job. So I'll just give you one example. My father was in the burn unit 42 days. He had 7 skin grafts. And my mom was there to feed him breakfast, lunch, and dinner, literally, slipping back and forth from the medical school. It helped that it was across the street. And she did all of that while not losing her job. Now, anyone who's taken family law with me or spent any time with me outside of school knows that my parents adopted me and my sister. And that has had a profound influence on me. in my life, obviously. I don't think I would be here but for that amazing gift. But it shows up in my work in countless ways too, whether it's my early work on family form that says we can't set up the biological family as the exclusive model, even if the biological family works reasonably well and is very protective of children across large groups. Adoptive families, it turns out, actually outperform biological ones. How many of you knew that? And there's a good reason. I knew that too. There's a good reason because these folks really, really wanted children. It's a huge selection bias, and it's a testament to these families. Now, my perspective as an adopted child showed up in Utah in the last few weeks, where I was fortunate enough, as you heard, to help with what I think is an amazing compromise that great state reached. But one of the things that we struggled with the most, right, was whether there should be faith-based adoption programs and that in effect are allowed to continue to place children with the kinds of families they placed before, i.e. heterosexual married families, or if that would change. Now that's a really hard question, and it comes out differently in different ways for different states, and they're making choices that, work for them on the ground. But my testimony in the House Judiciary Committee was the first time that I articulated, at least for myself, the questions that should guide, or the principles that should guide that question. And I think these are at least some of them. That we want families to make this amazing gift to children. That every child deserves a permanent placement because we don't want to strand any kid in foster care. That many lesbian and gay couples have stepped up to adopt, many at the invitation of the state. And we absolutely have to be sure that they hit no roadblocks when they step forward to make that kind of gift to a child. But there's a fourth principle too, that we should weigh carefully whether faith-based groups can make placements that are consistent with their faith. Because if they can't, many take what I call the nuclear option, and they exit the market. And these groups are really good at placing kids for adoption. So the question would be, can we leave them the room to do that, I think. So, enough about my mom. No chance that Glenn is here. God bless us. Okay, so I want to talk about my son. Maybe it's better if he's not here. In any event, many of you know that I'm a single mom, and many of you know in my writing that I'm a big believer in marriage, that it's good for children, it's good for the adults, and I think those things have been empirically demonstrated. Now, some people would see those two ideas as in tension, but they're actually not. Families often find themselves in less than ideal circumstances. And one of our great challenges is to respond to the different challenges facing different families, while recognizing that individual families have their individual strengths. Now, we cannot say often enough that the kids who have experienced a divorce, or for that matter, any bump in life, in fact, have the whole future laid out ahead of them. My son is doing a really incredible job right now charting that future. And I am probably most interested in seeing how that unfolds, right? Legislators, like Senator Adams and others, often have to write policies that are supposed to strive for the ideal. But they don't want to fall into the trap of somehow stigmatizing folks or families that don't meet that box. And that is a really, really hard line to walk. 50 years ago, you may know, Pat Moynihan wrote the Moynihan Report. It wasn't really for public consumption, but it became public. And it had a lot to say about the state of the African-American family as he saw it. It was deeply controversial. Moynihan, in fact, was probably writing about the American family today. We have so blown past, right, his image of the family then, and that has its own challenges. It is possible that with so many families now forming outside of marriage, that we have to finally acknowledge that we may live in a post-marriage world, and we may need to write a new social script about folks who parent together outside of marriage or live together outside of marriage and what they owe one another. But however that script reads, no part of it should say this, that somehow those families are less than the ideal. That can't be the thing, that can't be the message, and we have to be very careful. So I'm especially grateful to be on this faculty with people like Jennifer and David and Dick, Richard, because this is a faculty that is the most careful that I have ever been on, right? Careful thinking is done here. And if there is any faculty that can push a person to refine and develop an idea, it is this one. And this faculty, it turns out, has been mentoring me for a whole long time before, for example, Charles Tabb raised the idea of joining the faculty. So David, correct me if I'm wrong, read my very first law review article even before I got a job, and then called me to tell me what I should have done better, which was fine, right? He was right about that. I spoke here about nanotechnology. I spoke here about Sharia law and sundry other things long before anybody had any idea that I would join this faculty. Harry Krause, who's one of our emeritus faculty members, as you know, came to the workshop at Harvard that became the corpus of my second edited book on the ALI principles. And he shared stories that were very influential to me over dinner about how it is that something that I think is so deeply flawed, Glenn Wilson, I'm glad you're here, that I think is so deeply flawed about the family, how it is that that managed to get traction with a handful of academics, and how it is that the ALI's name got put on something that I think was so deeply flawed, right? And but for Harry sharing that, I think there were ways in which the book would have been wildly different, right? And then he would share that with somebody who was a baby scholar. Really struck and stuck with me. So I can't tell you how thrilled I am that in January, we hosted 5 scholars from around the world, selected from a pool of 26 across 6 countries, to do for them what Harry Krause did for me and David has done for me. So this faculty and university rocks at something else too. We want to say that often. And that is that we follow the facts and that we care about the empirics of things. So we've just started, but my colleague from ACES, Brian Oglesby, Wen Bu, where are you, Wen, and others across the university are now asking whether how one comes to be in a same-sex marriage, or any marriage for that matters to how one experiences the benefits of marriage. It's a pilot grant. We've enrolled 200 couples, is that right? 400, hey, look at that, across 4 states, right? And we just got another small grant to add more couples to that, so we have greater sort of power in the results that come out of it. And the idea grew out of a common sense idea, the study did, that if you marry in a voluntary same-sex marriage state, it would seem to be, or likely to be, more positive for that couple because that community is more embracing of that marriage. And marrying in what I call a no way in hell state is probably not going to be as good, right? And another thing that's coming out of this study is looking at what suppositions ordinary people have about marriage rights and remedies versus those for cohabitants, something that's almost wholly unexplored, surprisingly enough. And Brian and I will be presenting some of those results, we hope, at our faculty retreat. And we have a few that are interesting. So this grounding in facts, in some ways, I think is a single defining part of the new family law program. You probably saw the posters if you've been walking around the law school or just come in about the Offutt lecture, which is an inaugural conversation with the author that's going to be co-sponsored by the health law program and the family law program. Now, Dr. Offutt was in the Wall Street Journal the other day, wasn't he, Dick, right? And he is a longtime critic of allowing folks just to opt out of vaccinations, whether for reasons of faith or otherwise. And he has been pretty much affirmed in that with the way that some of the measles outbreaks and other things have really gotten legs. Now, as much as I stand up for religious liberty, I too worry when parents, for example, are permitted to make choices that hasten the end of a child's life. And as I've said elsewhere, many of those deaths were wholly, completely preventable. And that is a tragedy of extraordinary dimensions. And we need to think hard about it, even as we respect faith. So we're excited to have Offutt here to do this inaugural conversation. And one of the biggest things on our horizon is a partnership with the Law Review. How many of us are on Law Review? A few of us back here, right? So, and we'll be doing with the Epstein program, DePaul, and the Law Review a symposium tribute, in fact, to Harry Krause, and it will talk about law, religion, and the family unit after Hobby Lobby. Senator Adams will join us from Utah to talk about the sort of balancing of these things. Jennifer Elrod on the Fifth Circuit will be here, and many others. And one of the things we're especially pleased by is it will be the first chance that we have to give a Lifetime Achievement Award in family law, and Bill Eskridge will be the first recipient of that from Yale. And the reason I think that is incredibly extraordinary is because you have to know that in June, right, there will be a hallmark, landmark decision coming out of the Supreme Court, however it rolls. And to have Bill Eskridge with us to talk about the arc of family law, arguably the single most famous academic associated with gay rights, I think is extraordinary. So, and the rest of that two-day symposium is a who's who too. It's going to essentially span the life cycle from birth to death. On the death side, Dick Kaplan will be talking about end of life, end of life stuff. We're going to have some of our Beckett Fund attorneys who litigated Hobby Lobby with us at the mandate beginning of life side. And we're going to have attorneys for the separation of church and state too. So it'll be extremely balanced. In any event, I can't say enough good things about the law review and what a privilege it has been to work with them so far. So I'm going to say just a couple more things. One piece of the family law program that's self-consciously in the mode of public engagement that I think marks this university is an inaugural conversation that we're going to have with judges, legislators, practitioners, and scholars. And we'll be joined by the sociologist at Johns Hopkins, Andy Cherlin, who has a very nice new book called Labor's Lost Love. We'll be joined also by June Carbone and Naomi Kahn, a pair of legal scholars, a very nice book called Marriage Markets. And then, of course, William Galston at Brookings, who is Clinton's former domestic policy advisor. I can't imagine a better group of people to start that conversation, which will be about when economic struggles constrain family choices. And we have members of our new advisory board here, Rob Jacobson and Deborah Walker, who are partnering with us to try to make that the best discussion we can. And that discussion is going to be about what I call baby steps. Like, what can we do in the here and now? Because we're not going to be able to change this economy back to lift people into the middle class the way my father was lifted. So we better do something else. And what exactly that something else will be to improve the lives of real families is the point of that conversation. So one more quick point. I love the public engagement in this faculty, right? Self-consciously, the gravamen of what we're supposed to be doing. And the people that I've always admired the most are the ones that had skin in the game, right? So Margaret Howard just came from having an amicus brief at the U.S. Supreme Court and hearing oral argument of it, right? Skin in the game, right? Anthony has been on the phone with Georgia legislators trying to talk them out of being dopes with respect to their own RFRA, and which he now calls the Lazarus Law, right? Because it keeps being resurrected. But in any event, and I really wanted to thank my students in particular for loaning me or being so flexible over the last 3 weeks while I was in Utah. I think that was the right thing to do. I thought it was the right thing to do then. And I only believe more and more, having watched what happened, unfortunately, in Indiana, that it was exactly the right thing to do. We have to be in the game. And we have to be in the game because the game matters. So we have a choice. At least on this particular issue, we can call a truce in the culture war that has pitted gay rights against religious freedom, which is what I think Utah did. Or we can continue to make it worse. And I don't know about you, but I think the truce is the better way to go. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. As we adjourn, I invite you